The North Review confirmed today that they are recommending a new commission to rule on controversial parades. Dr. North stressed the importance of trying to reach local agreements, but where that fails, he feels it would be better if an independent commission decides rather than leaving it to the RUC. The police will, however, be allowed to appeal commission decisions to the Secretary of State, and they still have the final say on the day of a parade if public order becomes the primary issue. Here's Jane Loughrey.
Following Drumcree, the government set up the review of parades under the chairmanship of Sir Peter North. He and his colleagues, former Presbyterian moderator Dr. John Dunlop and Strabane priest Father Oliver Crilly, have made 43 recommendations after considering more than 300 submissions and letters. During the summer, the then Chief Constable made it clear the RUC didn't want to take decisions on controversial parades.
I am sick, and so are my colleagues, sick to death of being stuck in the middle of a non-winnable situation.
So the North Committee has suggested setting up a 5-member commission to adjudicate on controversial parades. Interested parties are expected to try and broker a local agreement, but if that fails, the body would then issue a ruling. The Chief Constable will be able to appeal to the Secretary of State if he doesn't agree with the Commission's decision. Ronnie Flanagan believes there's some merit in an independent body.
It certainly is not a panacea. The real solution has to be when people respect each other's tradition, when locally arrived at accommodations can be made. So while there's some merit in a commission, I would see its primary job as being to put itself out of business, really.
Under the proposals, a new criminal offence would be introduced for anyone defying the Commission's decisions. The North Committee also wants the minimum requirement for notice of marches to be changed from 7 to 21 days, and a code of conduct to be introduced for marchers. The Orange Order says the Independent Commission will create a factory of grievances and exacerbate the problem.
The report bears a remarkable resemblance to the submission made by the SDLP, for example. And I think many of the proposals that they made have been embodied in the report, and I think the views of unionists and members of the loyal orders have been largely ignored. And what we have in the North report is, I think, a protester's charter.
But a protester's charter is not the way the report's being viewed on the Garvaghey Road.
I am not happy about the fact that the RUC can intervene at any time and overturn any decisions. That's taking us right back to square one again.
The Lower Ormeau concerned community has given the report a guarded welcome, but point out dialogue is the only way forward.
There's no chance of this solving the problem on the Ormeau Road on Easter Monday, or for that matter, by July. But what's going to solve the problem is dialogue by sitting down and talking. That's what's going to solve the problem.
The police authority believes the North report contains a number of its suggestions.
As we see it, what the recommendation of the North Committee does, it relieves the RUC of having to make a decision about contentious parades, and it leaves them with the proper responsibility of policing parades. So instead of having people blame the RUC for taking the decision and then blaming them for how they carry it out, the North recommendation will remove that responsibility from the RUC.
Although it's highly unlikely the proposals will be implemented in the lifetime of this Parliament and before the marching season, the Irish Foreign Minister says it's important they're put in place as soon as possible.
There's already murmurings of confrontation, so I would like to see quick action on this report. I think we've got to move on very quickly to get into a climate of mediation, which I believe this report offers, rather than the potential for conflict which is there if we do not take action.
The North Committee is acutely aware their report has been published only 8 weeks away from the start of the marching season. The first parade is due to pass along the Ormeau Road behind me, a traditional flashpoint, on Easter Monday. Jane Loughrey, UTV Live in South Belfast.
Well, after this morning's news conference, I spoke to the North Review Committee.
This is a report which is 256 pages long. There's a lot in this report for all the sections of this community. Therefore, I think it's very important that people from the different parts of this community read it very carefully and see what's in it for them.
How much emphasis are you now putting on local accommodation?
The very important issue, and that is why we have given this major role to the Commission to facilitate mediation, and in the sense that it doesn't have any more work to do, that it doesn't have to issue determinations at the end of the day. If there is one group or other which is not willing to go down a route of trying to find an accommodation, then clearly the Commission will be interested to know that.
That could apply to the Orangemen of Dunloy, who will not only not speak to the residents and parents group, but will not speak to the mediation network anymore.
We want people to have various ways of resolving it locally, because the local resolution of conflict, as the report makes clear, is fundamentally important.
But are you saying if a group will not speak directly to the group who are opposing them, and indeed will not speak to a third-party mediator, that will count against that group?
Well, they will have to be involved in attempts to reach some kind of local accommodation, and that will have to be taken into account. But we are wanting to make it possible for people to be involved in that in as constructive a way as they possibly can.
If it becomes a criminal act, as you suggest, to defy an order of the Commission, what are the police to do? Are they to arrest the ringleader or all 30,000?
Well, what we've said is that there should be a new criminal offence in addition to the offences which there are at the moment. And now it will be a matter for the police to determine who is responsible for defiance of the Commission. And it will be an operational decision as to whether they arrest people on the ground or whether they take evidence and charge them later.
You are given 4 guidelines by which you might judge whether a parade should pass or not. Tradition is not one of them.
One of the matters that the Commission will have to look at is the features of the parade. That's the term we use in the area, and that, of course, will involve whether there have been regular parades in that community. So you shouldn't. I think the term of your question seems to be suggest that we're rejecting tradition. We're not.
Well, the review's report was submitted to the Secretary of State, who gave his response in the Commons today. And he has now joined our political correspondent, Ken Reid, in London.
Thank you, Mike. Secretary of State, you've kicked this one to touch today, haven't you, until after the election?
No, that's wrong. First of all, we've adopted that part of the report's recommendations which says there shall be a parades commission. We said we want to set that up immediately so that it can help with mediation, with education, with conciliation. Very important, because we agree with what the Commission says. It's local agreement that must come first. As to the second part, making the Commission the deciding organisation, the deciding body, whether a parade goes ahead or not, we said we want a very short period of consultation, 2 months.
But this consultation's been going on for months. Why do you need more?
Very different. People have had their say to the Commission. Now it is important, we think, that they should be able to view the very special and separate solution which the Commission itself has recommended and express their views. In doing this, we're doing what the Commission said they would expect. The Commission said in their very first chapter, no doubt there will be a period of consultation. There is going to be a period of consultation on part of the report and for 2 months only.
But the unionists are very relaxed about this, where the SDLP and the Alliance, well, they have a different idea. I mean, has a deal been done with the Ulster unions?
I think there's no deal been done with anybody. I think it was very interesting in the House of Commons. There was no steam at all in the charge that the leader of the Liberal Party, Mr. Ashdown, brought in Prime Minister's question. He said it was dishonourable to consult and not to introduce it all in one go at once. Prime Minister dispatched that straight away by reading that piece of the report which I've just mentioned.
But what sort of a message is this sending coming into the marching season? Nothing appears to be done.
Rather a sensible one. Supposing we'd said, now we're going to go ahead with this and ram it down everybody's throats, we're not going to consult about this very radical recommendation. I know what sort of questions you'd be putting. You'd be saying, isn't this a calculated insult to the people of Northern Ireland? Here's the British government disregarding what they want to say, not even listening to them for a couple of months. That's what you'd have been saying, and you'd have been right.
But what sort of a mess is the next Secretary of State going to pick up on this issue?
Well, don't you think it might be rather helpful not to talk in this enormous language of doom and gloom, because this is a terribly serious matter for everybody in Northern Ireland, and we don't want to talk about what sort of mess this is going to be. I think there might very well have been a mess if the government had said, we're ramming this down everybody's throats, even though the Commission itself said, we expect that there will be a period of consultation. But let's not talk about that. Let us realise that there will be time at the end of this, if the government needs to legislate with the support of everybody in Parliament and have it in place for the principal marches of this summer.
Just very quickly, Secretary of State, in your view, will most of the North Report recommendations eventually be implemented?
I'm not going to express an opinion about that second part of the North Report, which says that the Commission ought to be the deciding body. I've said in the statement I made to the House of Commons, I'm not going to express a view about that one way or the other. We're going to wait and see how this consultation develops, and that's a sensible way to go about it. I'm not going to go into this business of verdict versus evidence later.
Secretary of State, thank you, and back to the studio.
Well, earlier there was tension between the government and the Labour Party when it was announced that many of the North Report recommendations would be the subject of further consultation.
Before the Secretary of State made his statement to the House of Commons, Paddy Ashdown urged the Prime Minister to push the recommendations of the North Review body through Parliament immediately.
But I would, in view of what he actually has just said, invite him to read the North Report, and perhaps particularly paragraph 149, which says we're well aware that it's for the government to take a view on how far it wishes to adopt our recommendations, and goes on to say, no doubt there will be a period of consultation, and there may be some question as to how far new structures and procedures can be put in place in time for the 1997 marching season.
In his statement, the Secretary of State said further consultation was needed.
The government, for its part, is clear that any such provision should be provided by primary legislation, by bill, rather than by order in council. The government does therefore intend to establish as soon as possible an independent body of 5 people to be known as the Parades Commission, with the mediation, conciliation and educational roles recommended in the report.
But across the floor, the Labour Party was obviously uneasy.
We support the recommendation and would like the Secretary of State to explain to the House why he feels that further consultations are necessary on this point.
In reply, the Secretary of State insisted that the consultation period was absolutely necessary. However, it was clear that the bipartisan approach between the Conservatives and the Labour Party over Northern Ireland was under considerable strain. And the government was also coming under attack by the SDLP and the Alliance Party.
I think it's an explosive game the government is playing. It will be seen as a most cynical exercise to save themselves, 1 week, 2 weeks more in government in Westminster terms, and for that they're going to put the entire population of the north of Ireland at risk in relation to this question of marches.
It's very disappointing. The government knows what it ought to do, it's known it for some time, and it looks as though it's treating the North Commission with disrespect and simply using delaying tactics to stop accepting what really needs to be accepted because of fears of unionism.
The Unionists, however, took a different view.
Well, I'm glad the Secretary of State has decided to go out to consultation over the more radical proposals in it, because I do think those radical proposals to take decision-making on matters that affect crucial areas of security in Northern Ireland away from the police and the government is actually ill-conceived and would lead to more trouble.
The key to the situation is the traditional parades, and each body of people heretofore respected the traditional parades. I have traditional parades that go through loyalist areas that are nationalists. They're allowed to go through because they've been going through so many years that is taken for granted. Now the IRA, not the Roman Catholic residents, but the IRA have decided to oppose every traditional parade. And that matter is not dealt with at all in the report.
It now seems that the contentious parades issue will have to be picked up by the new government whenever it comes into place. And both sides agree that it's a particularly hot potato. This is Ken Reid for UTV Live at Westminster.
I want to thank you all for the overwhelming support on the Troubled Land. Please do like and subscribe, as it helps us to grow the channels and spread awareness on this terrible conflict. If you haven't already, make sure to check out our second channel, which deviates from mainstream documentaries and delves deeper into personal stories that have arisen from the conflict. Many thanks to all our Patreon members. If you haven't already, please do join for free. The link's in the description.